Settle down, you mugs. Forget it, Jake. It's Budapest. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you appreciated that fantastic film. And once again, welcome to the Castro stage, the creator of Budapest Noir, Eva Gardos.
Thank you.
I have to, right off the bat, a little confession to make. When the Jewish Film Institute asked me if I wanted to co-present this film and interview the director, they called me on the phone and I said, well, let me ask her how she feels about it, because we were having dinner together in Los Angeles when I got that phone call. So that was entirely the Jewish Film Institute's idea to show Budapest Noir. But Eva and I have actually been friends for several years now, and it was very exciting. I've kind of known about this project from the very beginning. So tell the audience, please, how this all came about.
I have made another film in Hungary, can you hear me? Called American Rhapsody, which was based really on my own story and my family story. And so I had spent a bunch of time in Hungary, and I read Budapest Noir in English, actually. There's 4 books, but this is the only one that's translated into English. And I thought it would make a cool movie with some work on the script. But I liked the fact that Budapest was really a character in the movie, and I liked the underlying story that is in there, the idea that people don't want to see what's going around them. So I submitted it to the Hungarian Film Fund. We got a writer, and it went on in the usual sort of process.
Which took a while, because you live in Los Angeles,
Yes.
and you were working with the co-screenwriter who was in Hungary. And,
we would Skype every morning. I would Skype my morning, his evening.
Yeah, pretty. Now I have to ask, to an American audience, and to somebody like me who has seen all of these movies, right, and read all the crime fiction, you know, the story has a very classical, very familiar feel to it. In Hungary, are they familiar with this type of story, or is telling Hungarian history through crime fiction something new for them?
I think that this sort of genre of noir film was fairly new to them, and I actually think they're a little tired of being told about their bad history.
Well, of all places on earth, it's like between the rock and the hard place. It's Hungary, right? I mean, a nation really of tremendous artists. I mean, what would Hollywood be without the Hungarian influence, right? But stuck between the Nazis and the communists.
And now the
rough.
Nationalism.
Yeah. Did you feel, as you were, I'm going to dive right into this immediately, as you were creating this film, that it was timely once again?
Yeah, I'm afraid I did, to some extent, yeah.
Because I think it's just to see nascent Nazism and the ugliness of it all, I was very struck. I have not read the book, so I was very struck by that very theme that you just mentioned, the unwillingness of people to see what's happening right in front of their eyes.
Well, when we were shooting the movie, that's exactly when the Syrian immigrants were held in the railway station for I don't know how long, and many of the people who worked on the film and the production was taking food and blankets for them and stuff. And so the railway station we shot at subsequently had been just closed down, and there were like all these people living in there. And so certainly there is a huge, and not just in Hungary, but there's a huge anti-immigration feeling all over Europe. And so I think that connects with the anti-Semitism too.
Did you find when this project was approved, that it was easy to get people to work on it because it was sort of a film noir? I find that like when I do my stuff for Turner Classic Movies, everybody's really, really excited to show up on the set because we're going to make something that looks like noirs. You know, people are so thrilled by the style and the look of it.
Well, first of all, it was a good script. Our screenwriter was very funny, and he really got a lot of the dialogue really right. And so all actors were always happy to find a good script. And our main actress, Reka Tanki, loved the clothes and loved the idea of, and she was very upset with me that I didn't let her wear a lot of clothes because of the fact that she's not supposed to have a lot of money. But, you know, she loved the idea, and so did most of them, that they would go into makeup and go into costume and then go to a set, and there'd be this whole world created for them. I think that's very exciting for actors.
Now she's interesting because I have not read the book, but my understanding is that character of Christina, right, his girlfriend, the photographer, is not as developed a character in the book as she is in the film. So that's your doing.
Well, first of all, she wasn't a photographer; she was an illustrator. But we decided to make her a photographer because it felt like the whole her going to Berlin and all that was kind of made up by us, because we wanted her to have a sense of what was happening in the world. And so the idea is that she'd been to the Berlin Olympics when she'd gone away. And also, I guess I felt that a lot of the women in the 30s, and all the time, they stand up to their men, and they're equal, and she was very, very good at that, and that was very important to me. That
and
she'd be strong.
Yeah, and she's terrific. She has an amazing presence on screen, and she's like a big thing now, right?
Right. She's in that movie that was nominated last year for Hungarian Academy Award, of Body and Soul. I don't know how many people saw it, but she played the psychiatrist in there. She was very, very funny.
And you told me an interesting story about the actress who plays the dead girl, the woman who dies. Tell us that story. I find it very intriguing.
Well, Francesca came in to audition, and she really came in to audition because she was a good friend of the casting directors. She's actually a very big star in Hungary, and she came in and did this little audition, and I said to her, Francesca, you are so great, because she really moved me. And I said, you know, I know you're like a really big actress, but if you want the part, it's yours. And she said, oh yeah, I'll take the part, because after all, this whole film is about me. Is that the...
But I assume that in Hungary, because she was so well known, that it's quite shocking
That
when she ends
killed.
up being the victim.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. It's like
Right.
Janet Leigh in Psycho. It's like, wait a second, this can't be happening. Yeah. So and
She's very lovely. I mean, she's really striking, I think. I mean, she's a very good actress. She has really great moments.
Well, she does have literally just moments in the film to make that impression, though, and she does it. I mean, she's fantastic, and your lead actor, he came out of retirement or something, right, to make this film.
We had spent, I mean, obviously we couldn't make the film if we didn't have Gordon, and we had spent a huge amount of time looking for the leading man, and we tested a lot of actors, and people said to me, there's no such a character, there's no such an actor in Hungary with that sort of easygoingness and that sort of charm, and they're just, you know, mostly theater actors, and they don't have that. And the cinematographer and I one day were in a cafe and we ran into Christian. And the cinematographer said to me, you know, he was a really great actor and he was at the head of this theater. And then he retired, partly because he had gotten custody of his young son and he didn't want to go to the theater every night. So we asked him, so he had like started a production company, so we asked him to come in and test, and he was perfect. And he was great to work with, too. He just didn't like wearing his hat.
Well, that's a challenge for modern actors, right? I mean, men back in the old days, they knew how to wear the hat. Did you have to work with him on this to get it just... So he does a pretty good job. He does wear the hat.
He does a pretty good job.
Pretty well. I can tell you what he does do very well. He fights very well. I mean,
Well, that's what was amazing about him. We had a guy, the middleweight champion, come in and train him. And he said, well, I actually know how to box a little bit. And the guy said, oh, yeah? And they started to fight, like, there in the casting room. And then he said, you know what? You don't need any help. But he's one of those guys, he plays music really well. He's really one of those guys, you know, man for all seasons. He really has he's a drummer, he plays jazz, he does photography.
So is he going to make more movies, or did he do this just because this was the one he wanted? I think every guy secretly wants to play this part, right? You get to walk around and like smoke cigarettes and give the 1,000-yard stare. All the women are attracted to you. You get beaten up, and then you get to beat up the other guy. And it's like, yeah, this is the...
I mean, I think he'll definitely make more movies if he gets offered the right part. But, you know, he's very fortunate. He has a production company. He's made this life for himself, and he doesn't feel he's dependent on getting, you know, the right, you know, getting cast unless it's the right role. So.
Right. And how do you deal with when you're writing a fictional story that has historical fact behind it? How do you deal with when you have to fudge things and move things around? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the Prime Minister he didn't actually die on the trip back from Germany, did
No, he died in Germany.
Oh, okay. So
he was in Germany. That was totally true.
So that's all true. Okay.
That was totally true that he died. He had cancer and he went there for treatment. And he was very, very good friends with Hitler and the idea that he was in training.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that was the historical background that I do know about is, you know, that to climb out of the Depression. I mean, Hungary really did think like, well, you know, these Germans are onto something, you know, the country was very torn. But do you feel a responsibility or anything towards historical accuracy when you're doing this, or is it just, hey, we're just making up a story?
I do feel a sense of historical accuracy, although I did. Say to my costume designer, for instance, you don't have to be like totally like on the mark, you know, if you want to change the costumes a little bit or the hair, you know, I gave them some leeway to do things a little bit differently to make it look cool.
Were there really women boxing matches in a nightclub?
There were women boxing matches, although there was no such a nightclub as the boxing club. That's something that the writer made up, which I thought was actually very good.
And is that the writer of the novel or the writer of the screenplay?
The writer of the screenplay.
Okay, so you mentioned at the top that the author, Condor, is his name?
Condor Vilmos, yeah.
Condor Vilmos, that he is anonymous. Have you ever met him?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's not his real name, for instance, you know, and if you look at his biography on the book, it gives you this biography that is totally untrue, but
Okay. Is there a reason that he wants to be anonymous?
I don't know. We had hoped that when the film came out that he would kind of reveal himself, but he decided not to. He did one interview, but he decided not to.
Now, did he reveal his feelings about the film?
He he revealed his feelings about the film. He liked the film very much. He didn't like the fact that the girlfriend had changed, because he felt that that was one area in life that Gordon shouldn't have any conflict, which, you know,
Tough luck.
kind of goes against filmmaking.
Yeah.
What else? It was so long ago.
Well, I know that, and I love that we can say this because you've already seen the film and it's not a spoiler. I love the end of the film when he comes to the house and reveals the truth, and that scene is not in the novel, correct?
No, and the shooting and all that is not
Yeah.
in the novel. The scene with the father was sort of it wasn't the end of the movie. It was just, the book was a little bit more episodic. It was really about this newspaper writer's adventure, and it was a very atmospheric book, but it didn't have the drama that we felt a film needed. And also in the book, the coffee maker, the guy who owns the coffee factories, he really didn't care about his daughter. He just cared about his business. And I really felt that was sort of a cliche to to portray him as someone who just cared about money.
Yeah. The woman who, her mother, is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, she is incredible because she's only in 2 scenes in the movie, right?
Yeah.
And wow, that last scene, her face is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, she's
and is she?
She
Good
runs,
job, I
she
guess
runs,
I'm saying. Nice casting.
She runs a theater in Budapest. She's a theater director, and she plays a lot with the guy who plays her husband. They did a lot of theater together, so they've worked a lot. But we spent a lot of time casting that role as well, those 2 roles, the father and the mother. And we also spent a huge time writing that scene, getting it right. And it was also a little bit tricky because those 2 older people were much more experienced actors than Christian, and it was important that Christian held his own. And so we rehearsed that. We rehearsed that scene for, I think, a day and a half before we shot anything. And we also built that great set, I think, which actually made the shooting of it much more interesting than if we had just been in a small room.
Well, it made sense, and when he walked in, you felt like, oh, I see, this is the rich industrialist, but it also plays as archly theatrical because, this is obviously the climax of the story here. Everybody on stage for that moment. It's quite brilliant, really.
But the Bauhaus movement had been really big in Hungary, and I had been to Berlin, and László Moholy Nagy was a huge player in the Bauhaus movement, and if the war hadn't happened, Budapest probably would have looked a lot more like that. So I wanted to bring that aspect into that also is part of Budapest architecture. There are Bauhaus houses there.
Yeah. Okay, last question, and then we'll do some quick wind-up. The film just looks spectacular. So whatever you can tell us about your cinematographer, because it is rapturously beautiful.
Well, his name is Elmer Ragai, and he had done my first film, American Rhapsody. He's extremely well known in Hungary, and he's award-winning cinematographer. And he had also done this film, 1945, that is quite successful now. And I think he's very, very, very talented, and his lighting is beautiful. But I also think some credit should go to the production designer, because he really, came up with. He was a very young guy, the production designer. He was in his early 40s, and he came up with the idea of the mannequins and the newspaper on the poor woman's wall and things like that I thought was really great. And also the costumes. I mean, the 3 elements really went together, I think, to make it visually stunning.
And I know I told you this the first time I saw the movie, but I have to say it again. If you decide to do a sequel, give, what's her name, Valeria, the woman who worked in the newspaper, she needs to have a movie of her own. She is just fantastic. She was the most stylish person in the movie, I thought, with those little tinted cheaters.
Well, you know, in the book, she's supposed to be an albino, and we didn't go quite that far. But we did, you know, pay homage to it. She also, by the way, plays my grandmother in American Rhapsody. And the guy in the newspaper stand played my stepfather. Oh. So.
Okay. Okay, we're going to have to wind up. But if you want to know more about this, Ava has given the Film Noir Foundation an extensive interview in our quarterly Noir City magazine that will be coming out in the fall when the film will actually get its American release, correct?
The film actually is going to be released in January because we don't want to. Anyway, in January, so we'll have to figure out when it should come out in the magazine.
Very good. But
do we need to do any questions? Does anyone have any
we
questions? We don't have
we've
time.
done them. We don't have time for the questions.
Okay.
But I just want to say, I hope you'll come back on August 9th here at the Castro. I'm doing another show showing Steve Desjarnatt's Miracle Mile, which is one of my favorite movies ever made. We'll be showing that here on August 9th. Ava, this was absolutely spectacular.
Thank you.
Thank
you for coming. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ava Gardos.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.